Chicago's older neighborhoods carry a heavy historical weight. When Mason Reed moved into a notoriously cheap apartment building following his divorce, he was looking for a place where he could exist without being noticed. The buzzing yellow hallway lights and dark water stains on the ceilings suggested a building that had been neglected for decades. But the silence he expected never arrived. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., a specific auditory pattern began. First came the scratching, slow, dragging noises. Then the muffled crying. Mason assumed it was a neighbor, a reasonable conclusion for anyone living in a building with paper-thin walls. That assumption fell apart when he confronted the landlord. The police had already checked apartment 5B, the unit directly above him, twice. It was empty, locked, and had been entirely vacant for 8 months. One night, Mason stood in the hallway outside that empty unit. The whispering started again, a woman's voice, weak and desperate. It didn't just drift through the air, it seemed to vibrate through the doorframe itself as she pleaded for help. We rely on the idea that walls are solid, permanent boundaries between ourselves and the unknown. But Mason was beginning to realize that these boundaries are often hollow, providing space for something to hide just out of sight. The geography of the haunting changed suddenly. The scratching and crying no longer echoed from the ceiling. They emerged from underneath the kitchen floor. As Mason muted his TV to listen, the voice spoke again. It didn't ask for help this time. It whispered his name, proving that whatever was moving beneath the wood had been watching him. Mason pried up the floorboards, expecting to find old pipes or a crawl space. Instead, he found fresh, wet human fingerprints clinging to the underside of the wood. They were still damp, as if someone had just been pressing their hands against the floor from the other side. A door can be locked and a window barred, but the ground beneath a person's feet is assumed to be absolute. When a threat emerges from the subfloor, it bypasses every defense we are conditioned to build, turning the floor into a thin, vulnerable membrane. It attacks a blind spot in our spatial awareness, where the intruder is already inside the foundation. The terror comes from the realization that the architecture is no longer a shield. It has been transformed into a concealment system for something that shouldn't be there. When the police arrived, they discovered an old wooden hatch hidden beneath layers of flooring and Mason's kitchen rug. Prying it open released the smell of rotting water and decay, revealing a narrow, pitch-black crawlspace stretching beneath the building. The landlord's demeanor shifted from dismissive to terrified. He admitted the building sat atop a series of unmapped hospital tunnels from the 1930s that were never properly closed or surveyed. During the severe winter storms of the 1930s, the hospital became dangerously overcrowded. Historical accounts suggest that staff began sealing the most terminal patients underground to die in the tunnels, using the roar of the storms to mask what was happening below. On the surface, the hospital maintained a clinical, orderly facade. Clean linens and quiet wards hide the fact that the actual capacity of the building was being managed by discarding people into the darkness of the foundation. The dates of previous disappearances reveal a tightening pattern. Clara Vance vanished after weeks of reporting whispers. Eli lasted only 11 days. Both followed the same trajectory: initial scratching, the sound of crying, and then a total erasure of their presence from the building. The building serves as a physical conduit, tethering modern residents to the unrecorded deaths of the 1930s. It provides a path for a buried history to reach upward, claiming new lives to fill the voids that were never properly mapped or sealed. An officer climbed into the crawlspace, sweeping his light across the walls. He found thousands of overlapping scratch marks and wet fingerprints covering the concrete, evidence of dozens of people desperately trying to find a way out of the dark. The officer's radio went silent, and his flashlight dropped into the mud. The second officer shouted out his partner's name and dropped into the hole, disappearing instantly into the shadows. From the darkness, the sounds changed. The single woman's voice was replaced by a chorus of dozens of overlapping, inhuman whispers, all chanting Mason's name in a rhythmic, desperate cycle. Something slammed against the underside of the kitchen floor with massive force. The impact sent dust raining from the ceiling, as the whispering escalated into a crescendo of screaming that shook the walls. Investigating the crawlspace didn't solve the mystery of the missing tenants. It merely provoked the entity within. It transformed the building from a site of a haunting into an active hunting ground. When backup arrived, they found the crawlspace completely empty. The officers had vanished. The only new evidence was a set of fresh, wet footprints leading out of the hatch and directly up the stairs toward apartment 5B. Inside 5B, everything looked untouched. Furniture covered in sheets and thick dust on the tables. The only disturbance was a soaking wet patch of carpet near the bedroom closet. Underneath that carpet was a second hatch. When it was pried open, the flashlight beam hit the face of a woman staring upward with a disjointed neck and a wide, static smile. Then, dozens of pale hands reached out from the darkness beneath her, dragging everything into the void. The lights in the building died instantly. Gunfire echoed through the halls in the dark. When the emergency lights finally returned, apartment 5B was empty. There were no hatches, no bodies, and no signs that any officers had ever been there. The building was demolished 3 months later, but the lot remains abandoned. Neighbors still report hearing 3 slow knocks coming from beneath the soil at midnight, followed by a voice asking for help. Mason Reed was never seen again, his name added to the list of those who vanished into the building's footprint. We assume the structures of modern life provide a permanent shield against the past, but the architecture we inhabit is often just a fragile veneer, built over an unquiet history that is still waiting for its chance to reach the surface.